Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 51 of Storyteller Conclave. This is a show all about helping you run the best tabletop role-playing game that you can. Whether you're a new storyteller or dungeon master learning the craft, or an experienced storyteller looking to take your game up to the next level. I am Sarah, and tongue-tied.
Yeah, and we are live, clearly, because we do not bother with our mess-ups like that.
Look, I think that's the first time in close to a year I have messed up...
The intro?
The intro.
I couldn't think of a time when you did it before, so yeah, I would agree.
I think
this is first.
I think it's a pretty darn good streak. We were actually just talking. We haven't missed a week in 51 weeks.
Yeah.
And we're coming up on our 1 year episode, one year anniversary.
Yeah. I mean, it feels weird at the same time, kind of like we reached a milestone or like climbed a mountain at this point,
right?
You know, with what we've done. So yeah,
it's been a bit of a journey. It's been a bit of a journey, but we'll do some retrospective stuff, I'm sure, in our anniversary episode, and take a good look at it.
I'll bring that up later.
Yeah.
So if I'm not going to say it now, but later on, I'm going to talk about our anniversary episode and what we have planned.
Could be a topic for discussion. Absolutely.
Yes.
So we've got things all switched over now with the new hosting.
Yeah.
So we're officially all up on Blueberry and stuff like that. So
yeah.
Our episodes should be coming out all normal. And,
you won't have to do strange things to try and get to them. So
turnaround time will also be extraordinarily quick because we're doing all of our own posting now. So
yeah, it feels weird. I could almost say like they don't even need us anymore, kind of a thing. So
yeah. Well,
but here we are.
Here we are.
Almost a year.
It's crazy.
It's good though. It's good.
So tonight we are talking about accessibility in gaming.
Something that that one of our contributors, actually Knox, had suggested was that we kind of step into this, that we kind of grace the topic a little bit.
Sure.
But I went ahead and did some extra digging because it's something that I didn't. I had flat out told him that I had never dealt with that. I didn't have any quote unquote disabled players at my table. Mm-hmm. But as I realized, I did.
You did. Yeah.
I've had more than my fair share than I'd ever thought about. But the one thing that I didn't think about was because of the fact that it was just accommodating. And there were some things that I read and some wonderful articles that I pulled together for both of us to read over. And I'm going to be putting the links out there for people so we can discuss this a little bit more. But I didn't consider even myself.
Yeah.
And I think it's its own weight. So I'm going to flat out say it. I'm dyslexic.
Yeah.
It's something that I've dealt with all of my life. It's been a huge pain in my ass more times than enough. I think that my sister was dyslexic and she was 4 years older than me when I was young, and she went through a program and kind of did things, but nobody ever tested me. Mm-hmm. By the time I came around, it was like, oh, he's doing fine. No big deal. But the whole time I was dyslexic.
Sure.
So as I went through school, it just had been an assumption that I was bad at math. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't until I was in high school when my high school algebra teacher looked at me and said, you know all the formulas, you know what's going on, like, you just failed at the test, so I need you to come in at lunch, we'll talk about this. I'm like, crap, I'm doing bad, let's do this thing. So I come in, and she has me do the test on the board, like each question. Mm-hmm. And as I'm writing on the board, I stop and start to erase something. She's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I wrote this backwards. And she's like, what did you write? Show me again. Because you did that too fast. And I went, well, I did this. And I just wrote, she goes, are you dyslexic? And I'm like, well, my sister is. Mm-hmm. But you've never been tested. No. You're dyslexic, Rob. What you did, and she goes back through my test. She's like, I can see every place where you made a dyslexic error. Oh my God, why didn't I notice it? Why didn't anyone notice this before?
You were transposing numbers?
Constantly.
Yep.
Constantly, because I do it under stress. Mm-hmm. When I'm moving quickly through something, I do it. I do it with work all the time, and I work with numbers all the time. Mm-hmm. But I've always had to accommodate myself, but I don't think about it. Yeah. I just do it naturally. Mm-hmm. There was one time when I was driving or riding with a friend, and I looked over at the Mega Millions sign. I said, "Wow, it's 7.2 million," and he's like, "It's 2.7 million." I said the words. I read 2.7, but the words coming out of my mouth was 7.2.
Yep.
It transposed and came right out of my mouth. And it wasn't until I heard it, basically, it was like, I did say that. Why did I do that? Like, I can think of the number and see it in my mind and like of what I read. Why did I do that? And there's no rhyme or reason. Like, I can't justify it. There's obviously medical and psychological reasoning why it happens.
Sure.
It just does.
Yep.
And it set me back a lot of times. And having Palladium as one of my first systems was not a great choice.
Oh, no.
I had a lot of arguments with players accidentally. Like, I would say something, it would come out of my mouth differently. Mm-hmm. And then, a couple seconds later, they'd be like, oh, no, blah, 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 blah. And I would agree with them kind of haphazardly, like, of course. But then they would argue with me about it. I'm like, what are we arguing about? And then it would come down to the fact that I said something backwards.
Mm-hmm. Why are they so tilted over taking 17 damage? Because you told me I took 71. That kills me 3 times over.
Kind of, yeah. And that was the whole thing, was it was just a kind of a silent, invisible disability. And again, I don't think of it as a disability. And that's one of the things that we're going to kind of get into tonight a little bit. But there's a lot of that out there. There's a lot of quote-unquote invisible issues.
Yeah.
In
not just physical ones like that, but mental and emotional as well. My own personal experience with disability is less something as, I suppose, tangible as dyslexia, but more a lifelong struggle with depression and anxiety.
Well, I don't think that's less tangible, but...
Well, I mean, it's not something as simple to put your finger on as I transpose numbers, like, but for me, depression has always just kind of been there, and it's always just been something I've kind of had to work through.
Right.
And for a lot of reasons, stems from some trauma in my life and stuff like that.
Right.
But, getting some therapy and stuff like that has really helped give me at least a good toolkit to work with it when it does rear its ugly head.
Right.
But, and again, it's one of those things where, like, I've never really thought about it as a disability, but once I started kind of looking into this, it was, like, on all of the lists, of, like, this is, you may experience, disabilities such as depression and anxiety. I'm like, oh, wow, that's... I guess it is. I mean, it is a disability. It's something I have to work through. Mm-hmm. And it's
it a challenge that affects your everyday life on a consistent basis?
And it is. It is because it's constantly sapping my motivation, especially as a storyteller trying to run a campaign.
Yeah.
I mean, like, literally right this very moment.
Yeah.
I'm struggling with that. I really haven't picked up and started writing the next leg of my campaign yet.
I've noticed. But I'm also not pushing you on that.
Right. Just simply because I'm just not in a place where I can...
I think that's true for a lot of people right now.
Yeah.
And they're not necessarily clinically depressed or, have some kind of anxiety that they require, but we're all anxious. We're all depressed. We're all stressed out. We're all working moment to moment. The new normal is not cool,
Yeah, exactly.
It totally changes your mind about how the games like Fallout and stuff work out. Like, if you're a survivor, it's not as hunky-dory as you think it is.
Oh, yeah.
And we're at like level 1% of that. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. But then we have other things that are just as equally as hidden that were in our group that we kind of discussed about, which is like, we've had players, and we currently have players that have had memory retention issues.
Yep.
And that's something that's very hidden. Mm-hmm. Simple as color blindness.
Yeah.
Red, blue, or what is it? Red, green colorblind can be a major thing.
I don't know what the player's particular color blindness is, but I do know that the particular color of certain things, when we're like, oh yeah, the green miniature. Well, sorry, 3 of them look green to me. Which one is it?
Yeah, exactly. Or hearing impairment.
Yeah.
Is another thing. That is,
and having to be mindful of where that player is sitting at the table, to be able to better hear me, to be able to better hear, I've been doing voices for NPCs before, and been stopped in the middle of a monologue and gone, I'm sorry, I did not hear the last 3 things you said, because
right,
your voice is within a certain range, doing this NPC's voice, and
it's not there.
It's just not hitting my ear.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
so I did some reading recently. Actually 2 weeks ago when we first started talking about this, and pulled some stuff together and found basically 3 different fields of information, and was kind of surprised at how much was out there, like that was in support and communicating about this. And what I will say is that there are a lot of resources that are out there.
There
It's
really are.
surprisingly good out there, and some of the things that again are adaptations that people are using today.
And I would say I didn't have to do a lot of digging either to really find them either. They're pretty available.
Yeah, I mean, Roll20, we found out, is actually a really good resource for people that sit under multiple situations where they might be either partially blind, deaf, or have colorblind issues. All can use Roll20 very successfully because it was designed for and with in mind screen reading.
Yep.
And enhancements and accessibility tools where the actual screen gets read to you. So it's very easy to get that data off of it. That there's a lot in there.
Magnification, color shifting, contrast, enhancements, things like that help visual impairments. Are all available on pretty much digital media. So when you take your game from a tabletop game and move it to digital media, like Roll20 allows you to do, suddenly all those things become tools that are in your toolbox now.
Yeah, digital PDF books are a good thing, especially if they're done right, if they're not just images.
Yes.
And they can actually be digitally read. With a
text
lot of
speech.
text-to-speech kind of systems. That helps a lot because then you don't necessarily have to go through a Braille system, which, strangely enough, there are groups called DOTS, which is a program that's going right now that's not only making dice, but they're also making strides with another group to do conversions on books that have never been converted.
Yep.
Which is huge. That's great. And making them free to the people who need them.
Yep.
I think that's great.
I was actually really blown away when I was reading about dots. This is something I didn't know about before we were doing research for the show here. I kind of want to go back to the dice because the small numbers on small dice is another big hurdle for visually impaired people, and they not only make 3D printable Braille dice that are free. You can just download the 3D files for them. But for those of you who do not have 3D printers available to you, they actually have an arrangement with Shapeways.
Yeah.
To be able to print them off and get them to you. Now, they can't do the printing for free, obviously, through Shapeways, because Shapeways needs to get their cut. But, yeah, look, if you've got your own 3D printer or can make one available to you, the files are all free, and you'll have your own set of Braille dice, no problemo from them. And I just thought that was really cool. Like, there's just the idea that I'm kind of going back to how technology is moving the whole hobby forward. Thinking about making accessibility aids 3D printable and free and available like that is just great.
Yeah, definitely. There was another thing that I kind of pushed in your direction as well, which is available through Drive-Thru RPG, which is the Fate Accessibility Toolkit.
Yeah, I saw the Kickstarter for this a while ago.
Yeah, I did too. After I looked at it, I was like, wait a second, I did see this, and it is for the Fate system. But like any good, I would say, errata. That's outside of the scope of necessarily a game, there's a lot of information in there that's good for any game system. And it's by Evil Hat, and it was actually done with the original creators in mind. So the developers of Fate and other parties got involved to do this. And effectively, it is an amazing guide to not only how to best work within the terminology and social awareness of players who may be disabled at your table, but also how to properly incorporate people who have disabilities as characters.
Yep.
And keeping things in mind. And it's a beautiful write-up. And like a really beautiful write-up.
It's worth noting, too, that the book was actually written by someone with a disability as well. So, it's not just a bunch of abled people telling you about how to work with disabled people and disabled characters at the table. It's, for disabled people by disabled people.
Right.
And I think it's really important that from a representation standpoint, and also because you need to know what you're talking about.
Right.
So I think that was really great. And like Rob was saying, it's got a lot of really great things for not only players but characters as well. I was immediately thinking about different characters who are disabled.
Yeah.
In popular culture.
There's a ton.
And yeah, I mean, it wasn't a short list at all.
It's grown quite a bit. And I would have to say, depending on how far back you go into, I will say, story culture, you get a sense for where it changed. I mean, you look at something like Tiny Tim, and how his disability was the image of who he was.
Yeah.
And how he was less Tiny Tim, and he was more the injured,
the little
decrepit
kid,
boy,
yeah,
who was that.
Poor him.
Right, like what was unique about him? What made him wonderful? But then you start moving forward, and you're like, you move forward through time, and you start looking at other stories that have had characters that have been disabled, and immediately your mind kind of jumps into comic books. And really that's where a lot of things started to shift, where you've got characters who have a disability, like Daredevil, who's blind, and comes out beyond that, and people forget about it. Like other characters, it is not a fact of their existence. It is something that they work actively with. But again, it is a change in their set, but it's something that sets them apart.
Sure.
You put in here Charles Xavier from X-Men.
I mean, I put him on the list, but that wasn't the first thing on the list, actually.
No.
I would say the first one I dropped on this list was Geordie LaForge, because I'm a huge Trekker.
Yeah,
and
having a blind man at the helm.
And yeah, exactly. And I always thought it was really great how they handled his disability. I mean, he was blind. I mean, he did have a visual aid, or a visual, a tool to help him,
an assist.
Assistance, right? Is the word I'm looking for. Sorry, I'm stumbling here.
You're fine.
But at the same time, I mean, he was, like I said, a blind man at the helm, a blind engineer. And he could see all these wonderful things through his accessibility aid, different wavelengths of things, but he couldn't see, like, just the normal light spectrum, And I always thought that was just a really cool sort of, like, he had an alternate way of just looking at things. It never impaired him.
But at times it wasn't even part of the story.
Yeah, exactly.
You just moved on. And I think that's a key change.
Yeah.
Another one that you've got on here that I think is another key change, but again, very recent, is Hiccup from How to Train Your Dragon.
Yeah.
Like, they lingered on the fact that he lost a limb for a very short period of time, and only highlighted it when it was critical. But beyond that, there are whole sections where it's ignored.
Yeah.
Thankfully. Because it's not what makes him who he is. And that's the whole thing. He's
an exceptional dragon trainer. It has nothing to do with the state of his life.
Right. Or a tribe leader as time goes on.
Yeah.
So in that series, it kind of shows you how to move away from that. But what was unique about that storyline is nobody ever dwelled on it. The camera dwelled on it. He dwelled on it. But no other part of the story dwelled on it. So I think that was really unique in the way that they handled that.
I threw on this list Harriet Schiff from The Magicians,
which I was unfamiliar with. You had to explain that one to me.
I'm
aware of the storyline and such of what's going on in The Magicians, but I don't know any of the characters.
Yep. So Harriet Schiff is she's the daughter of the leader of the library. The library is kind of this really, like, fascist sort of magic. They want to kind of control all magic and who gets to do what and know what and stuff like that.
Right.
And so as the daughter of the leader of the library, she's kind of broken away and become kind of a resistance leader who's trying to get magic out into the hands of the general public, essentially. And she is deaf. And there are whole sections of her scenes where it's all just done in American Sign Language. You don't even get subtitles. It's literally just silence and her and another character just signing at each other. And if you don't understand sign language, you either look it up or you ask someone who does, because they're not helping you. And it's worth noting that the woman who plays Harriet Schiff, I apologize, I don't actually have the actress's name, is deaf herself.
Which is a wonderful thing to put through.
A wonderful thing. And there are flashback scenes where she's shown as a teen and as a child, which were also played by deaf actresses as well. Which I think is great, because representation, as I will constantly browbeat everybody with, representation matters a lot. And I think it's really great that they went out and made sure that they got deaf actresses for that.
It's a wonderful thing that people are considering it, and that it's part and parcel to the person. It's no different than like, oh, we need an actor who has short, black, rough hair, and we're going to need their teenage and a child for it. Okay, that's great. That's a visual cue to addition. But what other things are quirks about that person? You know, well, they have a sharp nose. Okay, what else? And their voice is a little low. Great. What else? That acting directors and casting people are going, no. Tell me about the character. Like, tell me the truths behind this character. Well, we can just have them act it. No, I need to know about this character so that we can build them properly.
Yep, absolutely.
You know, and make it a person. Make it a whole person in the story. So, yeah. So, you did Tyrion Lannister in here.
Yeah, Tyrion Lannister, because dwarfism is, I mean...
But you don't think about it.
You kind of don't.
It's one of those things that kind of goes off to the side. You're like, oh. And I think that's a unique thing for fantasy, that we're used to dwarves and halflings being just small people in stories, and once you're role playing, you really don't even visualize that in your mind too much.
Yeah.
I remember one game that I played in a while ago, like a long while ago, where we came into a town of halflings and dwarves, and all of us were humans, and they kept telling us, like the GM was very strong about the fact that everything was small, and it made it very hard to deal with the town because they weren't used to people who were twice their size.
It wasn't built for you giants.
No. So like when we went to bed, it was always uncomfortable. Whenever we ate, it felt like we were eating a half a meal or 3/4 of a meal, or we'd have to pay double.
Yeah,
it was ridiculous.
Yeah,
you know, so it was just a different way to look at things. And I thought that was kind of neat, but now looking back on it, I'm like, yeah, it's just part of the world.
Yeah.
We were the disabled ones there.
Exactly. You were the people existing in a world that wasn't built to accommodate you.
Exactly.
And, yeah.
So one of the things that the book does a good job, that Fate Accessibility Toolkit, is it talks about disabilities as a whole, whether it's you're talking about the characters or you're talking about the players. And I think this is one of the most important things to understand, is things that I didn't even fully grasp that I may have been doing or not been doing properly.
Yes.
And that is that one of the first things is that, and this is something I recognize, and that is that disabled people, and I'm using that term in a very general way, don't always want to be cured. So it's not coming to a solution. You know, it's not, oh, this person's got a missing leg, and at some point we're going to get them healed or fixed or whatever.
Right. Geordie LaForge's character arc was never about fixing his eyes.
They did it a few times.
Yeah.
But each one of those times, it was never a loss for him.
It was maybe about upgrading his accessibility aid, but it was never like, oh, woe is me, I'm blind. When
or
will
I'm gonna
I ever...
have to be blind again. It was like, oh, that was a nice moment where I could see for just a little while.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Let's move on.
Right.
So don't dwell on that part of it.
And likewise, not all disabilities have a cure.
Yeah.
You know, it's not especially like, I know autism gets portrayed this way a lot. Yeah. Like listen, if you take the time to listen to the autistic community, like a lot of people don't, you'll note that there's a strong push from a lot of the abled community, the holistic community that says, oh, well, we got to find a cure for autism. No, stop that. There's nothing wrong with autistic people. Please stop trying to cure them. Yeah. And you'll hear the exact same thing from the autistic community by and large.
Yeah. Like, it is a different way of thinking and reacting and handling situations.
But it's not broken.
That's not broken. It's different. And it's a matter of managing that. Like, some people can't... I'm going to say this is funny, but this is a good analogy of it. I had a customer who was in Boca Raton, Florida. Okay. And everybody warned me about this guy before I started working with him, that he was very rough and very abrasive, but, otherwise, would do what you asked and got things done and really didn't deal with it too much. Sure. But they were like, he's very angry and he's very abrasive all the time. And I'm like, okay. So I started working with him. Now, keep in mind, for probably the previous 4 or 5 months, I'd worked with customers that were up on the Northeast coast, most Boston, New York, Maine, that type of area.
Okay.
And I'd kind of gotten used to the way they talk.
Mm-hmm.
And I will flat out say it. If you were born and raised in that area, there is a certain tone and movement that people have. And that cadence can come off to people who are not from that area as aggressive. Mm-hmm. That your demeanor is aggressive. When really it's just getting to the point.
Sure, sure.
The same could be said for a lot of people in certain areas, in certain places in Ireland. Mm-hmm. They have that same kind of drive and passion that comes sometimes off as very aggressive. He happened to have been from the Boston area, and I caught it. But he didn't have the accent anymore. He lost that, except for when he was really angry, actually angry. And within a week, I had him pegged. We were great friends. By the end of the month, when I actually got to go down there and work with him, he was practically ready to hire me from where I was working and work for him directly.
Oh, wow.
And we were just really great. And they were like, how can you work with this guy? I said, this guy's incredible. I don't know what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. And they were just like, but he's so abrasive. He's not abrasive. He just talks differently.
Yeah.
And then I got the project manager that I was working with understanding his speech, and everything changed.
Yeah.
It was like night and day. And I think there's a certain thing to be said about that, is understanding that not everybody came along with the same understanding and world development that you have.
Not everybody's going to communicate in the same way that you do.
Even from the same area.
Yeah.
Speech is different no matter where you go. It doesn't mean someone is less intelligent than you just because they're not using the same loquacious words that you might be using, or being able to put the phrase out in the same form. It doesn't mean that they're impacted by that in some way. Listening is one of the hardest things we can do.
Yep.
So
I'm actually always reminded, I've got my own story like that, of learning how someone communicates. And suddenly it opened up my eyes about everything. I used to work at a chain fast food, or not fast food, but a sit-down restaurant, sort of middle dining, sort of thing. And I worked back in the kitchen, and there was one of the bartenders there, bartender server, who always talked to me like I was a child. And like she was a kindergarten teacher, and I wanted to punch her for the first 6 months that we worked together.
Gotcha.
Because everything she said to me was like this.
Oh man,
and
man,
I was
that's
like,
just straight up annoying.
Oh no, you didn't.
Are you being condescending?
Well, then one day, and the whole time I thought she hated me, like, and I thought that's why she was condescending to me constantly.
Right? Well, no, I get it.
And then one day she comes over to me and she's like, I was wondering if you wanted to come to my place for a party after work. And I was like, excuse me? You are inviting me to a party? And like, I was like, I didn't know how to deal with it. So I was just like, I don't know. I'll see what's going on.
Sure.
Whatever.
Sure.
I'll give her the delaying tactic until I can kind of figure out what the game is.
Right.
I didn't know if this was like a hazing ritual or something.
I'm with you. It seems very awkward.
And then I kind of like listened to her talk, making plans about this party with someone I knew to be one of her best friends, which is one of the other bartenders. And she was like, okay, so I'll stop and get beer, and you stop over here and pick up this person to bring them to my place. And I was like, wait, she's using the exact same tone of voice with her best friend?
Yeah.
Oh, that's just how she talks.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm a jerk. Yep. I've hated her for 6 months.
Yep.
What? Oh, I'm that person. Oh, no.
Yeah. We had...
and I had a great time at the party.
Good.
The end of the story is I had a great time at the party.
That's all you can ask for some days. That is all you can ask for some days. But yeah, that kind of a thing. And I think that's part of like some of the other stuff that they talk about in here. Like, disabilities are not on or off. Mm-hmm. It's grades. So hers is just a way that she's not disabled, but it is within the accessibility spectrum.
Sure.
Of like, what am I doing to accommodate this? Mm-hmm. And so, like, whether you're deaf, meaning can't hear a damn thing, period, end of story, clinically deaf from birth, or maybe it's just a certain range, you're still deaf. Sure. Like, that's still something to handle and to assist with some level of accessibility. Mm-hmm. As a storyteller, do you constantly have to be aware of this? You have to keep it in your card deck in your head.
Sure.
But it's not like you constantly have to be like, have a questionnaire that asks like, do you need accessibility options? What kind of accessibility? And just go through the list. You know?
Right.
But you need to be aware that it could be a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And to be prepared when like those kind of situations where like, hey, you put out a list of I'm looking for people to play in this game online, and I want to use cameras, and one of the people flips on their camera, and you're not prepared for what's on the other side.
Yeah.
You know, they start signing to you, and you're like, uh-oh. Like I wasn't prepared for this.
Right. I don't know ASL. Oh shoot.
You know, do I have to go learn fast?
Okay.
Or can we find something to accommodate where you're typing to me or something?
Exactly.
And then suddenly they're typing 160 words a second. You can't keep up with their paragraphs. You know, that's where maybe you need to write some things and get a little faster on that.
Right. But I definitely think, you know, for something like that, it's more about keeping an open mind to your players and keeping an open dialogue. You know, we talk constantly. Communication is key in pretty much all things, you know. And so if a player does have a concern, and like we said earlier, not all disabilities are visible. You know, the particular player at our table that has hearing impairments.
Yeah.
There have been, you know, we've made a couple different accommodations for this player.
Right.
And, you know, tried a couple different things.
Yeah.
The first one was sitting that player next to me, so that they could hear me, but
they couldn't hear everyone else.
Right. They actually found that it was better to sit in the center of the table so that they could hear everybody kind of equally.
Yep.
And hey, whatever, you know.
Plus, they had some adaptive technology that changed. They got new hearing aids.
Yep.
Which was wonderful. That was a huge game changer. But that being said, it's not a toy. It's not something we can talk about.
Right.
It's something that they need. And that's, I think, any kind of adaptive device like that, like they say, you got to be careful with, because you can be very quick to say something about it, and you shouldn't necessarily dwell on it. It is not. I mean, you can ask about it. You can say, you know, is there something I need to do about this? But beyond that, if you mocking it, using it, propping it within your story, if it's a character, I think even if it's you're doing it for a plot reason, that's a terrible plot reason. Like, you know, don't have the bullies down the street, you know, steal the wheelchair of one of your characters. That is not cool.
Yeah, exactly.
That is unnecessary as anything else.
Right.
You know,
right.
do a different plot device. So,
and I would almost be a little leery of turning it into a gimmicky thing too. You know, like don't turn their disability aid into a tool. Like, what am I trying to say? Like, their superpower almost. You know, don't tie their identity to it.
Yes, I think identity is a huge thing about that. I mean, it's not the blind man who can fight.
Right.
His name's Daredevil.
Yeah.
He'll kick your ass. So, like, that's the truth behind it is that one of the things in the book is, like, we always, like, there was a time in D&D and in storytelling like this, it's Conan the Barbarian, not Conan the big dumb oaf who never learned to read.
Right.
You know, that's condescending. You know, and it's, you know, it's not, you don't include whatever that is because it's unimportant. You know, what was it? I was trying to remember it. There was a movie. I think it was a movie. It may have even been a book. And it just, my brain always thinks of things as movies, where one of the main characters comes in, and I think he's not a villain or anything like that. I think he's just one of the other heroes. And he walks in, and they're all like, "Oh, you're blind." "Yes, my name's Dr. Jameson. I'm a doctor." Thank you. And like that kind of answers the "I'm blind" and puts it to the side.
Yep.
Like, "Oh, Dr. Jameson, you're blind." "Doctor." You know, "Oh, Mr. Jameson, you're blind." "That's Dr. Jameson. Thank you. And please take my coat and hat." You know, and just walks right by them like it's no big deal, tapping them away. Because that's unimportant to why they're there. Like, you brought me here for a reason, and my blindness has nothing to do with that.
Yep.
So, yeah.
You ever see the movie Book of Eli?
I'm aware of it.
It's I won't get into it because it's kind of a plot twist. But,
Okay.
But it's a good movie and you should check it out.
Okay.
On related notes.
Okay. Fair enough.
All right, where were we here?
We talked about identity. Oh, pain is relative.
Yeah. Some kinds of pain don't even rate for someone who has it all the time.
Yeah.
So especially like, with people with chronic pain, stuff like that.
100%, I agree.
Yeah. I mean, heck, just thinking about the scope of my own, like emotional pain from just depression and stuff like that. There's, people ask me how I'm doing sometimes, and I'm like, oh, I'm fine, fine, fine. And then I like really think about it, and I'm like, oh, I'm slipping. I'm halfway in the hole right now. Actually, I am not fine. Like, now that you asked.
I mean, I will flat out say it. I remember the way that my wife described her kidney stones. Mm-hmm. So, like, there was a 4-thing comic that was on that I saw, just a 4-panel, and it's a doctor, and he says, how are you doing? Can you give me a pain scale on a scale of 1 to 10? 1 being, almost non-existent, you don't even notice the pain, and 10 being the worst pain that you could ever imagine. And then you see the person sit there and think for a second, and he's like, 2. It's like a 2. And the doctor goes, what the hell is wrong with you? Like, clearly he thought of the worst pain he could possibly imagine was way outside the spectrum of where he was at. And the broken leg that he has is no big deal. Yeah. It's not that big of a deal. Like a 2, maybe a 3 at the most. Like, like, what's wrong with your imagination? Like, but seriously, some people are just constantly in pain, or have such a pain threshold that, like, when they get to what you would consider like a 6 or a 7 on your pain threshold,
they're like, oh, this is starting to bug me.
This is like a 4 to them, maybe a 3.
Yeah.
And these are people who've dealt with a lot of pain, like a chronic amount of pain. One of our players has chronic migraines. Mm-hmm. He literally lives with migraines most days.
Yep.
And he just sets them to the side in his head. Like, there's not a lot of pain reliever, and there's only so much he can take.
Yeah.
And until it gets to a point where literally he's going to throw up.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I mean, and
then flat out, he will say it. I will go throw up, and sometimes I'll feel a little bit better, enough that I can just come back and be a normal person. We're like, that is not normal. For me, that's my everyday.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow.
You've known him a lot longer than I have.
I have.
And so it was actually by your suggestion that he was brought into the group, and I'm so glad that you did, because I
he's incredible.
Love the hell out of this person.
Yep.
But I'm not used to that. And I remember one of the first times he was sitting at the table, and he was just kind of like pinching the bridge of his nose or something like that, and you turned to him just like, you okay? And he's like, oh, just migraine. I may have to get up and throw up. But whatever, just keep going. And I'm like, whatever, just keep going.
You looked over him like he got a bullet wound.
like first off, I didn't know that you were in pain up until a second ago when he asked and you said yes. Mm-hmm. So that's, your base level for normal and being able to function through these migraines is amazing.
Right.
But then to follow that up with, I may have to leave the table to go throw up, just to keep going is
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, dude. Please let me know if I can accommodate you in any way.
Yeah.
Do not feel ashamed about that.
Yep. And I think that kind of level of accessibility and awareness, it has to be part of the DM's toolkit. Mm-hmm. Like, just being aware of those kind of things.
Sure.
And that it's going to be different for everyone. Mm-hmm. And I will flat out admit there are times when things are frustrating as a storyteller, where you're like, where you are already, it's usually something else that's pushed you to that level, but then something that sets you back, or something that one of your players does sets you back that fits into one of those scopes. It can get very frustrating, and you have to remember that your frustration is not about that.
Yeah.
It's something else.
Yeah.
And you have to get to the root of that to really get the truth. And I think that's the hardest thing as a storyteller, is being able to work around your own frustrations and understand that everyone is going to need a little bit of accommodation at some level, at some point, and you just have to be willing to work with them on that and help everyone else be willing to work on that, because you are their leader in this story.
Yeah.
And in this session, you know, you're the host of it, if you will.
Yeah. Every time I've started to get frustrated with other players and such like that for their accommodation needs.
Yeah.
I think back to, times when I've showed up at your table half in tears.
Yeah.
Because I was just broken that day, and I dragged myself over in spite of my brain telling me that it was going to be awful and that everybody at the table hated me, and and I still had a great time and whatnot, but I can imagine what it was like having to not only manage the game, but also my emotional state,
And some of it is looking past that and just being aware that it's there, kind of keeping it in the background, but understanding that it is something that you're here because you choose to be, and you're here because you enjoy it.
Yeah.
It is something enjoyable for you. And it's it's bringing something normal. And I think that's one of the things that we all need right now, is that we're all, and I'm not saying this lightly to make light of our conversation, but I'm going to say this, we're all at a little bit of a disadvantage right now.
We are.
We're all under stress in different places. We're all frustrated. Even the people who are in areas that are less affected directly by what's going on, who might have, a population that is kind of protected or different or separated from it, or environments where lockdowns haven't happened, because there are some out there, and definitely in other countries. Be aware and understanding that we're all under a certain level of stress that is going to affect everything we're doing. And the best thing that we can do is what we should be doing as storytellers, is being able to take that pause and just a breath and recognize that it's not just on us. It's everyone. And being able to recognize that and at least be aware of it enough to say, okay, whatever I'm doing right now and this feeling that I'm feeling is added onto by whatever else is going on.
Exactly.
The non-normal world that we're in.
You're familiar with spoon theory.
Yes, very much so.
The spoon theory is something that was kind of thrown out there on the internet. I don't really remember who wrote it originally, where its original attribution should go.
Okay.
And I apologize for that. But it was the theory that everybody has a certain amount of spoons per day. It's essentially units of energy that you can expend, both emotionally and physically, to get your daily stuff done. And there are some people who, they have all 10 spoons, or whatever, allotted for whatever tasks. They just, 1 spoon to wake up in the morning and get themselves ready, 1 spoon to get through, to get to work, 3 spoons to get through work, 1 more spoon to end up in the end of the evening, and, maybe you end the day with 4 or 5 spoons left, and that's great. But there are some people who struggle with things, and because of emotional impairments or physical impairments, have to spend a lot more spoons on things.
Yeah, you might only start the day with 3 spoons because you've already spent 3 spoons.
Yeah, just existing.
Yeah.
With chronic pain.
Yeah.
Can expend 5 spoons right there. Okay. And the act of, sure, you might be able to get up, get dressed, take a shower, but that only leaves you with 1 spoon left, so you're not going to be able to get through a full work day on that.
There's a reason why my game didn't get started back up, and that was because I was spending spoons on someone else every single day. Exactly. And then still having to spend my normal allotment of spoons, and by the end of the day, I was completely out of spoons and borrowing from friends.
Yep. And that is, and sometimes you have to dip into your spoon deficit for next day. And you can do it, but you're going to be at a deficit the next day. Yeah. Yeah. It's one of the reasons I'm not getting a lot of writing done right now, because a lot of my spoons are spent just managing, on things right now. And the reason I'm bringing this up is just simply because with the pandemic going on right now, not to date this episode too terribly much, but a lot of people are, you may not realize it, but everybody is expending 2 or 3 spoons just existing in this reality right now. Right. And some people are getting by just fine. If you're one of those people who has 5 spoons at the end of the day, you can spare 2 or 3 to be a little stressed out about the pandemic. But, if you're people who run a pretty lean spoon diet, you may not have those 2 or 3 extra, and they may put you into deficit occasionally. So there's one disability that we haven't talked about. Okay. That you brought up specifically for this episode, and something you wanted to do, and I'm with you, and I think we could do it. We can talk about it now. Oh, okay. Well, it's not really as an accessibility, or I should say, it's not a disability. But it is a barrier to access. Okay. Okay, and that is financial. Yes. So the reason I brought it up earlier with Rob is I just wanted to make sure that this was kind of okay to do, because I didn't want to speak for, and I'm 100% behind it. So we've been doing a lot of talking about this FATE accessibility toolkit. Yes. A lot of this list of considerations that we've been listing off to you is actually from the accessibility toolkit. Yep, which is available on drivethrurpg.com. That's why we're talking about it. Right, and it's available on drivethrurpg.com right now. And I know DriveThruRPG is doing a lot of sales right now because a lot of people are stuck inside. Yep. They want to give you reading material and things to kind of help with the togetherness and the gaming and whatnot. And so it is on sale right now for $7.50. So I would like to encourage you to go and pick it up because I think it's great. Even if you're just going to read it over just to have those considerations.
Have it on your shelf, basically, yeah.
To have it on your shelf and just have an extra resource of things just to consider as far as rounding out characters and being able to make your table more accessible to players in the future. But understanding that financial barriers are also, barriers to inclusion.
Yes.
And the people who need this most already exist in a world where they have to go an extra mile to feel included and to get through barriers to exist, on a certain level.
Yep.
And so what I would like to say is that if you are if you do want to get this book and are not in a position where $7.50 is going, is accessible to you, hit us up either on Twitter at @ST_conclave. Shoot us a DM on there. You can hit us
Discord.
Private message on Discord. One way or another, though, reach out to us. We'll be willing to give away. We can do probably 5.
Yeah, I'd say we can do 5 copies.
Yeah, we can do 5 copies of this. It's not a lot, but
we'll be happy to take care of it because we want people to have access to it because we think it's a great piece of literature, and we believe that the Fate people and developers who wrote it deserve it. Yeah, they deserve that funding for it.
Exactly.
So we will definitely support that. So again, just so you're aware, we will support up to 5 copies that's getting picked up. Just message us through any way. We'll try and get it to us, and we will take care of that with you.
Yep, absolutely.
So we do have a question that came through, and I think it's a good one, and we kind of talked to it a little bit, but I think it's important because it did come through as a question.
Yeah, and it's an interesting angle on the topic, I think. So Knox in the Box, in fact, he's the show contributor who put forth this question in the first place, so I want to thank you again, Knox. He asks, do you think props, clothing, or other tangible items might help someone with a disability, learning or otherwise, better understand and experience storytelling elements, or possibly help them connect to their character more?
I'm flat out going to say yes. One of the things that I think really helps, everyone in a way, get into things is visual aids.
Yeah.
Having minis, having a board really does help everyone who can't necessarily visualize things. And there is a direct accessibility issue for people who can't imagine things in their mind.
There is. Yep. Okay.
I don't know the name of it.
Heatsink, if you're in the live chat, please put the name of that condition in the live chat, so I can say it on the air. But yeah, he was. Sean was actually talking about this to me, and they had an example of just picture an apple. There are some people who can't even see a red blob when right. They kind of know it's conceptually red and round,
right? But
can't see an apple in their mind's eye. And there are people all the way up to and including people who can tell you the texture of the skin on that apple that they're imagining.
Describe it in vast detail. But so
aphasia is what it's called.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sean.
But that is just one layer to that. So I think. I think that is a less of a prop and another thing to assist in immersion.
Sure.
Just remember that not everyone's going to enjoy that immersion, and sometimes that immersion can be too much. Too much sound can affect people who might have hearing assistance and may not be able to handle all of the noise.
Like I set up my table in Tabletop RPG, or Tabletop Simulator, and one of the fires made a crackling noise. And I thought it was really nice and low and subtle. Everybody was like, oh, cool, you can even hear the fire crackling. And the person with the hearing impairment said, wow, that's really loud.
That's all I can hear.
and my first reaction was, really? My second reaction was, okay, literally, what does it cost me to turn that off? Literally nothing. I will accommodate the player,
He corrected himself. Is it...
Oh, aphantasia?
Aphantasia. We might even be spelling that wrong or saying that wrong, but you know what? We will definitely agree that it is what we describe.
Aphantasia, I think, is how it's pronounced. Yeah.
So it's just any time that you can assist, I think you're helping.
Yeah.
When you're giving someone a description about a room that they walk into and you use a movie reference or a book reference, or they're like, oh, I don't know either of those things. Okay, well, what kind of fantasy novels have you read, or what kind of fantasy movies have you seen? Well, I've seen Lord of the Rings. Okay, do you remember this scene? Oh, yeah. That's the kind of look that I'm looking at when you walk into that space. That kind of stuff helps every little step along the way and helps connect them to it. The other thing is anytime you can make descriptions from their point of view, I think helps that. Some of my favorite stuff is the old like, and then he pulls the gnome from his backpack.
Nobody expects the backpack.
And
gnome.
First of all, right there you understand that the gnome is in his backpack. Secondly, there's a full-size gnome behind him, so he's huge. Like, without a question, like his meaty hand just picks up and drops a gnome down. You've got that. So yeah, no, I totally agree.
I think props are great, but you have to you still need to know your audience with the props.
Yes.
Like for instance, I have given out literature to my players. Like I said, okay, you guys asked for assistance from the Arcane Library to get these, and I had print offs for them, and I did like fancy fonts and all that jazz.
It was wonderful.
And I've even done like handwritten letters where I used like a handwriting font and stuff like that.
Yep.
And then I handed it to the player at the table with dyslexia.
Yep.
So you need to be mindful not to make a gigantic gaffe like that. And I know there are other players
or give like sometimes scripts are just hard to read.
Yeah.
Or you hand them a riddle on a sheet of paper that's coded and now they have to decode it. So maybe they're physically not good at decoding, but their character would be.
Sure.
Things like that. Yeah, and then obviously don't make it a prop of the story where it is the only thing that they're aware of.
Right.
Don't give your blind gnome, rigger ruby lens glasses and then constantly talk about them. That these are like, his trademark things, because he's blind. No, that's poor. That's poking at it, and that's poking fun at it, and I think that is where things can kind of slide into the wrong direction.
Yeah.
So, next week topic is interesting. It's our anniversary.
It is our anniversary. It's going to be episode 52.
52 weeks of this stuff. Now, granted, it's technically like the week before but it's the 52nd, and that's why I'm going to take our 1 year on that.
Yeah.
So next week, or is it next week or the week after? Next week. So we're doing this next week. One of the things that I wanted to do is that I want to have all of our listeners be able to be available.
Yeah.
Not just our patrons. I know you guys are taking care of us a lot, but I want to do something different for just this episode. And I kind of want to get everybody in on it. So if you're hearing this and you've been listening to our podcast carefully,
we're going to open up the live chat on the
we're going to open up the live chat on the Discord for next week. And to kind of maybe entice you a little bit to join us, I'm also going to do some giveaways.
Yeah.
I have got
it's the first time we've done like weird giveaways. Yeah.
I've got a library of things, games, ebooks, all kinds of stuff that I can give away. That I've been storing for years. So I am going to do a live giveaway next week while we're going through our discussion.
So join us in the live chat.
Yeah,
help
everyone.
Rob with his hoarding problem.
That's right. We're gonna be taking on live questions from anyone. We'll try and use both the Discord and I'll try and keep MixLR up. We'll see if we can do it. But we're gonna do drawings basically throughout the entirety of the hour.
Samantha is hyperventilating in the live chat now.
I bet. So we'll be answering questions from people. We'll be doing giveaways. We'll be talking about different topics. We're going to revisit some previous stuff that we've done.
Yeah.
And
have
some
a nice
good
little
topics,
retrospective.
Yeah, we're gonna have some fun with our 1 year and kind of just do something different. Then we'll get back the week after that to our normal stuff, and we'll bring it all back around. But depending on how things go and how many people show up, we might be surprised with some of the giveaways. There might be some really decent sized stuff in there, but be aware that it's gonna be games and ebooks and stuff, and then possibly some other stuff depending on how things go around. So do we have any questions out of the live chat? Because we've got like about another couple minutes here that we could throw together. I know we had some good discussions last week.
Live chat's been pretty quiet tonight,
I
would say. Sam made a couple comments. Sean is there and helping us out with the Aphantasia thing.
And I can see some listeners out there at MixLR. We'd thank you for listening in on us live as well.
Technolich said he popped in long enough to say he was unavailable tonight.
Well, I guess he's just going to have to deal with that, but he's going to miss out for next week. That's going to be for sure.
It's been a quiet night, unfortunately. So
yeah. I mean, you had your good discussion on the story stuff with him that you were going over world building.
Yeah.
It's world scope and discussion about that. Like,
we talked a little bit about world building because he was. And this might be a good place to bring this up. So up on our Discord, we have some really good discussions that happen up on there sometimes. A lot actually. And one of our show, our Patreons, Techno Edgy Heroes, talk about him occasionally. Was working on writing a one-shot.
Yeah.
And he was bemoaning the fact that he thought he was going to be able to get away with not doing a lot of world building because it was just a one-shot.
Right.
And then realizing that he had he'd done a bunch of world building and feared that he was doing too much, and that meant that it wasn't going to be able to one-shot anymore because he'd written a bunch of content for it.
Right.
And I told him, I'm like, because you have a lot of content, like just because you've built the world rich doesn't mean that you can't tell a short story in it. And what I did was I went online and I found one of Isaac Asimov's short stories.
Yeah, which is a beautiful story.
One of my favorite stories in the world, called By Jupiter. Mm-hmm. And I posted it to him. It's only about a page and a half long.
Yeah.
And I said, read this. Let me know when you're done, and we'll do a homework assignment breakdown on it, So he went, he read it, and then came back and said, I said, okay, so I'm going to grab just the first sentence from this. You tell me how many facts you can glean about this world, about the world that this story takes place in, just from literally one line.
And you came up with dozen.
I mean, there was a whole alien trade thing that was going on, and that you could glean things about the tech levels of the aliens, the technology levels of the humans dealing with them, the situations between them, the diplomatic relations going on there from one sentence.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that at no point in the story did Asimov ever start breaking into the history of these aliens or the history of the humans. He just literally started out with, so trade negotiations were going like this with the aliens.
And video games do the same thing with their skybox. Like, it's visuals that you're seeing in the distance. They're not talking about it. They're not part of the active thing.
But they still establish the setting.
100%.
You don't need to know what that building out there is.
Right.
But the fact that it's on fire tells you a little something about the state of the world.
Sam had a good question in here that just came in.
Yeah, good. Thank you, Sam.
Yes. How do you justify characters with physical disabilities having higher stats story-wise? If they're missing an arm or something like that and have a higher dexterity or something.
How do you justify it?
I think there's a million ways to justify it.
I mean, people are complex.
Yeah.
People are very complex, and just because you're missing an arm or something like that does not mean that, A, you haven't gotten very good at manipulating things in ways that make sense to you.
I know someone who couldn't use their hands for a while and ended up using their feet amazingly well.
Yeah. I've seen videos of people, like, target shooting, bow marksmanship with their feet while standing on their hands. I mean, there's a lot of things that are possible in this world.
Yeah, I would say think beyond where your immediate scope is. Look beyond the injury, and think of all the things that they're doing just on the other side of it.
Yeah,
imagine the next day. How are they going to compensate? And then extrapolate on that 100 days later. And you'd be amazed how good and proficient you can be at something when it's like day 2 of you be struggling.
Yeah.
Now it's been their life.
Yep.
So how do you work around it?
I mean, heck, I was down after recovering from a surgery for like a month and a half, a handful of years ago, and there was I found myself easily, within a week. So anyways, I think we got to wrap up here. You can find us on Twitter at @ST_conclave, on Instagram, @ST_conclave. You can listen to us live every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Eastern on mixlr.com/storyteller-conclave. And please check us out, our show descriptions up on Twitter as well. You'll find the link to our Discord. Join us in the discussion there. Shoot us some questions. We'd love to hear from you.
And we'd like to thank our Patreon members, Knox in the Box, Sam, and now the Arcane Asylum. Thank you for joining us this month. It's so wonderful to have you all here and supporting us. Our intro music was Beyond the Warriors by Guy Frog. You can find that at guyfrogmusic.weebly.com or on Google Music. Our outro music, which you're hearing now, is Only Our Footprints in the Sand by Midair Machine. You can find that at soundcloud.com/midairmachine/tracks.
I want to give a big shout out to our families, Vicky and Sean, for supporting us all this time, all of our friends who've sat with us at our table over the years, and you, every single one of our listeners. We love you. Stay safe, stay healthy, Good night.
Good night.